Hello, and this one is called My Awakening. So my awakening happened a very long time ago indeed, and it was definitely catalysed by the spirits of plants. So this is certainly true for some of us. So some of us, having experience with plant spirits, literally act as a catalyst to awaken us to what's going on. And so for me, the catalyst was a combination of the tobacco plant and the cannabis plant, and this took place when I was in my late teens. And up until that point, I was completely mind controlled in as much as I totally took on face value everything that we are taught in school and in society. And within only a few months of starting to work with these plants, I've made the connection, and I would explain it all by the following sentence, which really is a cornerstone of all shamanic practice. And the cornerstone is the words I'm going to say, which is, nothing is as it seems. Literally, nothing is as it seems. And so I've been brought up and indoctrinated to believe that the government did everything for our own best interests, and all the authorities were there to help us. And gradually, and it was coincided with moving away from home and living with a bunch of people my age and being in a university. This is definitely part of the package as well. So it really was a whole amazing education process, awakening process. And part of it was actually, I was indoctrinated to believe that plant spirits were evil and one should not smoke. And it was being at university and being around a bunch of people who did, and notice how it affected them, that they seemed to be much more awake than I was, and really watching that whole process for an entire semester of about 3 or 4 months, and then going back home and then going back to university again and thinking, okay, so everything that I've been taught about these plants seems to be a lie, because these people are actually not behaving like rabid zombie imbeciles. They're actually incredibly smart, intelligent people, a lot more awake than I am. So this is interesting. So why didn't I explore these plant spirits too? So I did. And so that really was a major awakening for me when I realized that the world is not run for the benefit of the majority of us. And in fact, it really is, ultimately, it's kind of a two-tier system. There's those that have got a lot of power and those that haven't. And I'm a person that's lived my life as one of the masses, one of the people without a lot of power. When I say power, I'm really talking about the power that money brings with it, and influence by having mixed in the right circles. And certainly in the UK, it's about the right public schools. And in English, public school doesn't mean what it means in America. In America, public school means it's schools for the public. Well, of course, nothing is as it seems, especially in England. So actually, public school means schools for the rich elite. But I have mixed with some of these people, and that's been a real eye-opening experience in its own right. So this is really what I'm wanting to say, is through all these experiences, I have learned that when you cross through the glass ceiling of the people that don't have all this power into the people that do have all this power, then they have the ability to do what the rest of us can't do, which is the first and biggest and most important thing to grasp, is they are all completely above the law and above the courts and above the police force and such like, in as much as they can do things without consequences that the rest of us wouldn't even want to imagine doing in our worst nightmares. And this is one of the reasons why such horrific things do go on in the corridors of power, in terms of the way that children are treated as a commodity, and all sorts of things happen, which I'm not going to speak about in this film, because this is like a family film, let's make it nice and safe and easy. So that is the situation, is because they've got that power, that gives them the feeling they can get away with anything. And unfortunately, the system is organised in such a way that all those awful things are so endemic in those echelons of society that occasionally you'll come across someone who has a lot of power and they don't do these horrible things. They don't. and it becomes a matter of record that they don't, because I've uncovered some really interesting information about a New York detective who was given an unlimited budget to investigate prostitution and child abuse and all sorts of things, and he was given like a special golden pass, which meant that normally if a detective to investigate these things, they would lose their career. Their career would end, and horrible things would happen in their life. Sometimes not just a career, but these people, this particular guy, he had a total get out of jail free pass that he could investigate these things and there would not be horrible consequences because it came from high up in the NYPD. And so doing all this, he became aware of the fact that the horrors that I sometimes speak about are totally endemic in that society, and my research shows it to be the case in other societies too. And one of the things you look out for is these things called secret societies, things like the Skull and Bones and the Hellfire Club, that's referring to, in order, the USA and the UK, those two secret societies. They can do what they like, and they do horrific things. And I can understand that one of the motivations here is that when you get this sense of having broken through a glass ceiling into the echelons of the elite, and they're powerful with the money, and you get the sense you can do anything, and of course the power tends to go to people's heads. And it was a wonderful George Bernard Shaw, the wonderful writer from the 19th century, who uttered these famous words: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Everything that we understand from the way the world works seems to support his hypothesis, which I think you would probably regard to be his law. But there are occasionally people who are investigators and they come up clean and they've never done any of these things. And so because this guy had done so much research and he got interviewed by a very influential businesswoman in America, and she asked him about different names, and one of the things that did strike me is that when she mentioned the name of Trump, what about him? Is he involved with all this stuff too? He said, well, that's a surprising thing. I've not been able to uncover any evidence whatsoever that he's implicated or involved in these things, but there are so many names of people that are. And what a beautiful valley. So I've pretty much concluded my little journey from Sidmouth to Honiton, so I'm going to wind this up and draw some conclusions. So for me, it definitely was working with plants that helped me to understand that nothing is as it seems. And it's been my recent researches and also researches over many years, which I just dip into for a few days and then leave behind, stay well away from. It's not the sort of thing that you want to stay in on a full-time basis, because it would tend to make you go a little bit unbalanced. So I'm just having concluded a period, I've been through this stuff. So there's all sorts of stuff that does go on, no doubt about it. Not everyone in power is involved with it, but the majority get subverted into it, and that's part of the way the world works. And this is what I want to conclude with, which is perhaps the most important thing. There are billions of us that are not living these elite lives, and we are the safe ones. And there are the elite, and the vast majority of the elite are actually just as mind controlled, as enslaved as the rest of the majority, because what happens to them is when they get their first taste of power, they get corrupted by the ones that are really in power, and then of course that means they can be blackmailed forever, because they will always do as they're told, because they don't want the mainstream to catch on to the hideous reputation that they've created for themselves inadvertently by being very foolish. So then you've got the real power, and the numbers are involved is minuscule. So this is a thing to realise. Those that actually have control over the world, the numbers are minute, which means that ultimately the real power lies with us, which is why it's called the Great Awakening, and we're awakening up to our real heritage. So thank you very much for listening. Cheers.